Are you on? Hello?
You're on.
You're on.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Am I good?
You're good.
Awesome. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jen.
You got a little intro of me earlier, but I'm Jen, and got to know Jesus through this church. So I get so excited when I come back, and I just realized, I was like, oh my gosh, the last time I lived here, and when I decided to follow Jesus, I think, Bev, you said 2009. That was like,
A long time
what,
ago.
9 years ago? I was like, oh my gosh. It was so long ago. So I was trying to think of has everything stayed the same or changed? Is the youth group still called RPM? Is that
Yes.
still a thing?
Yes.
So that happened. It got titled RPM when I was here and started going to the youth group. So I was like, oh my gosh. But anyways, I'm so excited to be here. And to start, I actually wanted everyone to think of, well, first, anybody here have a pet? A pet? Raise your hand if you have a pet. A pet. And who thinks their pet is the best thing ever? Okay, I love my pet. Who also thinks their pet is the messiest thing ever? Raise their hand. Yeah. So I have had the privilege of, since I've gone to college and then graduated and living on my own and living in the city, I haven't really had to deal with the messiness of pets. But then my roommate, I just had a roommate who just moved in, and she was awesome, and she decided she wanted to get a puppy. Which I thought a little bit I don't know if this is the best idea. But then she brought the puppy home. It was a teacup Pomeranian. A Pomeranian's already super cute, but a teacup Pomeranian, it's that big. It's so tiny, right? It's teeny tiny. And so I was like, okay, we can have the puppy. It's so cute. But just like most of our pets with messes, I had some messy situations because this was a puppy, a brand new puppy. And so one day I walked home and I walked into my apartment. I was walking into the bedroom and I was wearing socks, which made the situation about to describe so much worse. I was wearing socks, walked into my room and stepped right into a pile of, surprised a puppy could make a mess that large. And then it was all over my socks. So then I had the messy situation. I can't even just wash my foot off. I had to actually figure out, how do I wash this sock? I don't want to throw it in the laundry, and so I was washing the sink. And it was gross. It was this whole messy situation, right? And I think sometimes that's not what we think about when we think of life with Jesus, right? When we think of the church and Christianity and things like that, we think of this picture-perfect world. We think of, you think of the church. If you look at the media, people are always wearing really nice outfits to church, right? You dress in your best, nice dresses, look really cute. I thought about what I wore coming here. I was like, okay, what am I going to wear? Do I wear a nice shirt? No, I'm going to wear an InterVarsity shirt so that people know what I'm from. But I wore heels, I was like, okay, I'm going to look kind of nice. I wore lipstick. So, I try to look a little bit pretty. And so we kind of have this view of church sometimes, right? And we think, oh, maybe that doesn't relate to Jesus. But I think sometimes it transfers over. Sometimes we think, okay, because church we have to look pretty and all put together. With Jesus we have to look all pretty and put together. And so that's kind of the title of what I'm going to be talking to us about today. And our sermon today is Beautiful Mess, is Life with Jesus Picture Perfect? Because oftentimes I think we think that way. But the story that we're going to talk about today, I'm really excited because we're going to take a look at a situation that is the opposite of picture perfect. It's an extremely messy situation. And I think Jesus reacts a little bit differently than we would expect to this messy situation. So before we start, I want to pray for us. Jesus, thank you so much for everything you're doing in this church. I know it's a time of transition and a time of changes and new things coming. But even if I'm sitting around and was talking to people and catching up a little bit on what you're doing here, Lord, I still sensed and believe and feel that you're moving here. Moving in people's hearts and lives, and so I want to thank you for that. So Lord, as we step into your scripture and looking at what it looks like to follow you, help us to really be open to your words. Not what I have to say up here, not what anybody up here has to say, but Lord, what you want to say to each of us individually. Thank you, Lord. In your name, amen. Awesome. And so I'm going to read this passage for us again. I know we just read it, but I want to read it through one more time so it refreshes our memory and so we kind of know this messy situation, what's going on here. So here's the passage. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Now, I want to pause here for a second because I think it can sound a little. We don't really know what a jar of perfume, we don't really know what's happening here because we don't really know what was happening in the culture of that time. But I want to give you an update that this was a very messy situation. This was not like a clean cut, this happened normally. Because, see, in this room and at this party that Jesus is kind of at, the people in the room are the people who you would picture at like a very put together church or something, right? It's, at this time, the only people who would have been here would have been male, so only guys. Guys were the only ones who were here. Also, they were really religious. They would have had to be Jewish. They were probably really spiritual. And they had connections. The only way they would have been able to get into this home and the place where this is having some sort of connection either with Jesus or with someone else. You had to actually like have connections to get in. So you had to really have this like picture perfect looking life to be able to get into this situation. And so this woman is literally the complete opposite of that. She's in a totally different situation. One, she's a woman. That just didn't happen. Women weren't invited to these things. They didn't go to these dinners. That just wasn't a thing. Two is she likely didn't have any connections here, also because she was a woman. And she wasn't necessarily really spiritual either. So there's a lot of things where it's like, why was she even here? But she decides to crash this party and do this really awkward thing about breaking a jar and pouring it on Jesus' head of this super expensive perfume. And so that's really funky. It's like a really interesting situation. And I think the question is, oh, sorry, my notes got all confused. And so I think it's a funky situation because it's like, what is happening here? And why is this woman making this mess and doing this really crazy thing? Also, the oil that she broke, it would have been common at this time for if you had a special guest who came over to sure put some like olive oil on their head or their feet. It was kind of a symbol of like, you know, thanks for coming, we respect you, here's a little bit of oil. But she decides to take this extremely expensive jar of perfume that was way more expensive than just a little bit of olive oil. This was like worth, I think I calculated it out, and at this time it would have been worth $30,000. So this is like a $30,000 jar of perfume. This isn't just like chump change. $30,000 that she decides to break and pour on Jesus' head. It was like a mess. It was really awkward. It would be like someone, you're hosting like a family dinner and someone just coming in and making a big scene. It really was awkward and strange. And so the question is, why did she do this? And I don't know if we totally know. There's probably a few reasons. One is maybe she wanted to be a disciple of Jesus, like some of the men who were in the room. Maybe she wanted to follow him, and she was just doing whatever it took to get to that spot. Maybe she was interested in Jesus and what he had to say. Maybe she wanted him to heal something, because at this point in time, he healed a whole bunch of people. Or maybe she just wanted to see him. There's been all these crazy stories about who he was and the type of person he was. Maybe she just wanted to see him. And so she did anything she could. She literally just made a mess of the situation. And obviously people judged her for it. So if you read the rest of the passage, here's what it says. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." So this reminds me of a situation. Let me find it. Here we go. This reminds me of something I've learned about college students. So I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek into the life of a college student. Any college students in here? Any? Okay, we got a few college students in here. Here's going to college in the next like 3 years. Yeah, so a few people who are going to go to college soon. So we have a few, so you guys will probably know a little bit about what I mean. But something that's really popular now is Instagram. Who here has an Instagram account? Few people. Who here knows what Instagram is? Just basically, you know, it's like a platform. So basically what it is, if you don't know, it's a social media platform where people mainly display things through images. So there's pictures, etc. And so one thing I've noticed with college students recently is there's this trend that you don't just have one Instagram account, but you have 2 or more Instagram accounts. And the reason behind this is because you have the, literally, picture-perfect Instagram account. Now this one's the one that you're okay with your parents seeing, right? Like, it's the one since your graduation, or oh look, I got awesome grades, or oh here's this fun event that happened, or oh visiting home, excited to see my family. It's the picture perfect one. And that's the one that you'll friend anybody on there. Like you'll let anybody see that, it's usually public. It's the one that you actually want the employers to see or want your professors to see. It's the picture perfect one. Then there's a separate Instagram account. Now this one's special, it's private. Only certain people are allowed to be your friend on it. And this one is just more the real you, right? Like the real picture. And they actually have a name for this. It's called a Finsta. There's actually a name for the whole thing. And you have this, and this one's the one where you just be yourself. So just goofy, fun photos, you know, you might post every single day, or overwhelming, like the type of thing that you only invite like your top 5 or 10 friends to see this Instagram profile. This is one for just the best friends. It's where you get to be your authentic self. And this woman in this story, it would have made the most sense for her to try to be the Instagram version of herself, right? Like the picture perfect one, try to get into the situation, make herself look good. But the problem was, she actually wanted a relationship with Jesus of some sort. Whether it was just to meet him or to maybe start following him, be his disciple, we don't totally know, but we know that she wants some connection with Jesus. And she actually realizes here something that oftentimes we need to realize with Jesus, which is that the only way to actually be in close relationship with Jesus is to be our authentic selves. And so that's our first point, is a messy relationship with Jesus is authentic. It's authentic because to be in relationship with Jesus, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be that one. Because if you're get into the head of a college student, if you want someone to be close to you, right, you have to actually be your real self. You have to actually be there and show your real self. And that's why there's this fake little Instagram, is to have those close friends. And that's the type of thing that, in this situation, the woman, she literally had no option. The only way she could be in a relationship with Jesus was to be her authentic self. And so I wonder what that looks like for us, if there's ways that we have been trying to be picture perfect with Jesus, or with the church, or with our community here, and trying to portray this picture perfect image of what we are supposed to be like as Christians, or just being here in this church. And I wonder if an invitation from Jesus today is to actually be our authentic selves with Jesus, to actually be authentic and be willing to let things get a little bit messy, because that's what real relationships are really like. But that's not everything, right? That's not the full picture. A messy relationship with Jesus is authentic, but so much more than that. And so the next part of this passage, I'll read the next section one more time. It says, some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing for me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have them." And so this was a risky move, right? Like wasting all this money, like breaking this perfume. She probably knew going into it that the Pharisees and the religious leaders and the people in the room were going to judge her for it, because it wasn't the religious thing to do. It didn't look picture perfect. It wasn't the thing that you do in the temple to get close to a religious person. It was like super messy. And then there's the question that they bring up here that, I don't know, maybe is a good point. It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and given to the poor. Literally, I said it was $30,000, worth $30,000. That's a lot of money worth of perfume. Couldn't have been sold and given to the poor. I mean, we all like really love doing this stuff, right? I mean, that's why you guys have the food pantry here. It's really awesome. Other services that this church provides. We really care for the poor. So what is Jesus saying here? That he doesn't care about the poor? It's a very confusing situation. Don't the religious leaders have a point here? Why does Jesus seem to write off that this money should be used to help the poor? Well, Jesus isn't just saying this phrase, "the poor will always be with you," to write off the fact that that the poor matter. But what he's actually doing is quoting part of the Bible. He's actually quoting something from the Old Testament, referencing an old law which the religious leaders of the time would have known really well. And that's in Deuteronomy 15. I think it's going to be up on the screen. "There will always be poor in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed towards your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in your land. And so this, there it is on the screen. So this verse, what it was supposed to be, it's a command from God to care for the poor and be open-handed for the poor. But if you go back and actually look at what the temple and what the religious leaders were doing at this time, they were doing the exact opposite of this. They weren't actually caring. So people who were poor or in a tough situation were actually pushed to the margins of society. And you see that when Jesus goes around and talks to all these different people, there's all these people who are poor, like widows who have no home and no one to take care of them or be with them or empower them or anything like that. There's blind beggars. And the rough part about this situation is those people weren't supposed to be there because God commanded the church to take care of those people, and they weren't doing it. Instead, they were pushing them to the margins of society. In fact, Jesus gets so frustrated with this situation that in just a few verses or a few chapters later, he actually goes into the temple, and there's this spot where people who are foreigners and poor are supposed to be able to meet and worship God because they might not have a chance to wherever they were coming from. And instead, it had been turned into a marketplace. So literally, instead of it being like a church and really pretty, like imagine if all the walls here were just lined up and I was trying to talk to you and there's people shouting, hey, buy this Bible or buy this devotional or buy this worship CD while I'm trying to talk to you. That would have been really tough and difficult for you to pay attention to anything I'm saying or the worship music or anything that's going on here. But that's what was happening specifically in the section of the temple for people who were either foreigners or poor or in a tough situation. And so Jesus gets pissed off and walks in there and flips over tables. He comes in with a whip. It's this weird picture of Jesus that we don't picture because we think of Jesus as this, soft, kind person, which he is, but he also gets really mad in this situation because literally the people are supposed to be doing this, being open-handed towards your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy, and they aren't doing it. And so what Jesus is doing here is he isn't saying, forget about the poor. They don't matter. Think about me right now. Jesus isn't saying that here. What he's actually doing is pointing out the hypocrisy of the religious leaders in this time, that they're picking on this woman who's trying to do an amazing thing for Jesus and show her love for Jesus, when really they should be taking the log out of their own eye and paying attention to the bigger picture of they're actually supposed to be doing something on their own. They're being hypocrites right here. But Jesus is different, right? Jesus actually looks at this messy situation and he doesn't judge this woman. He doesn't look at her and say, oh, you should be doing these things because it's supposed to look like this or this or this or picture perfect or all these things, but actually looks at her and looks at the situation and calls it beautiful. That's crazy. That's really different. And I think that leads us to a second point, which is a messy relationship with Jesus. Being yourself, not having everything picture perfect, Jesus actually says it's beautiful and looks at it as beautiful. Because a messy relationship with Jesus is authentic, and second of all, a messy relationship with Jesus is beautiful. Now I'm going to share a story about a messy moment in my life. I'm going to go back to way back in the day, 9 years ago, when I was the summer before college for me. So it was 2009, summer before college. And that year had been a rough one for me. You see, I had a crush on a guy that my friend was already dating. Bad news. High schoolers in the room are like, ooh, that's rough. Rough times. And, I probably could have handled it pretty well, just been like, okay, I need to, get over this. Maybe just distance myself from the guy or whatever. But, I did the opposite. I started flirting with him a lot. It was bad news. Senior year Jen was not the best person ever. And so he started coming to me, because we were friends, he started coming to me asking for relationship advice. And, I was hearing, oh my gosh, this girl is treating me horribly, which, I wasn't biased at all. But I was like, oh my gosh, this girl's treating me horribly. And so I was, giving him advice, and at one point I was like, I don't know, maybe you should break up with her. I don't know, I'm just saying. She was my friend too, there was something wrong with me. And so I was like, I'm on a relationship. So guess what, he did. And then guess what happened 2 weeks later? He started dating me. Bad news, bad situation. Then a month later, I realized what I did. I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? this is messy, this whole situation's messy. He probably made some bad decisions too, but a lot of that was on me, right? I'm the one who was giving him advice to break up with her, and I'm the one who was like, you should start dating me, and all this stuff. And I was like, this is bad. So a month after, he was in this relationship, he broke up with her for me, and then was dating me, and then a month later, I decided to break up with him. So this whole situation is extremely messy, right? And in the midst of it, I'm trying to prepare for college as well. I'd gotten into UC San Diego. I was trying to prepare for college, get ready. I'd never left Valley Springs before. I'd never lived anywhere other than Calaveras County. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, what does it look like to live in a city? Like all these things. And my life was literally a disastrous mess, right? It was so...
Who's doing communion?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. I know that as we've gone through this time of transition, everything that we've done in our worship has not been just perfect. It's been messy at times, and as I look out there, I can tell that people enjoy that because we find out that being messy oftentimes is being authentic, as she said. So right now we want to celebrate communion. If those that are going to serve would just gather there in the back. I'd like to read a scripture from Luke 22 to you. This is Jesus speaking, and it said that Jesus took some bread, which we have here this morning in these baskets, and he broke it and gave thanks, and he broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which I have given you. Do this in remembrance of me." And after the supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This is the cup of the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you." What I'd like to do today is to concentrate on the part of that